Before we begin, I should note this video contains major spoilers for the first season of ReZero. A few weeks ago, I was scrolling through YouTube and I received this recommendation, aptly titled, What Return by Death Looks Like to Other People. The actual video is really well done and helped me realize ReZero can get super confusing when trying to recall what events happened in the true timeline, and which others will forever be forgotten to our array of supporting cast members with Subaru's failed attempts. Hello everyone and welcome to my video, going through the ReZero anime's first season, but we'll be looking at it through the viewing glass of everyone else besides Subaru. Of course, nobody else is aware of his ability to return by death, so to anyone else, Subaru will at times feel like a divine being with omniscience, and other times will appear as a supremely pathetic and downright disgusting human being, I suppose. I think it'll turn out fun to see how drastic Subaru's mood swings really are, and will hopefully bring people up to speed on what's actually happened. I'll try to avoid my habit of dragging things out, but it might get dragged out a little, so please bear with me. Without further ado, let's get into it. After his final moments on Earth, Subaru spawns into Lugnica with his convenience store goods in hand. Honestly, I wonder what this looked like to onlookers. Nobody seemed to pay much attention to him in any case, so maybe his body was already there? Anyway, here's where things get interesting. The next scene has the Appa merchants, aka Kadomon, aka Subaru's first checkpoint in his new life. His deaths begin accumulating from here on, so we'll be skipping 3 deaths and resuming right back. Here's Flaming Fern's video I mentioned earlier. Links to all of these in the description below.
お兄ちゃん、変わった格好してんな。旅の途中か？
これは
そいつはリンガだ。兄ちゃん、リンガは？
なあ、おっちゃん。
あ？
俺のこの顔見るのって何度目？
何回も何も初めてだろうが。兄ちゃん、リンガは？
悪いけど天井無給の一文なし。とっととうせら。
Kadomon, understandably, is annoyed and shoos him away, so Sue takes a walk. A few minutes later, he passes by his stand again and confidently promises to buy an apple next time before dashing towards the slums. On his way, he meets Dumb, Dumber, and Dumbest, as Subaru appropriately named them. After many encounters with the trio already, he finally realizes the smart thing to do. Call for guards, which he 1001% receives in the form of Reinhard von Austria, the Sword Saints. Subaru definitely didn't realize the weight of that title though, because when Reinhard asked if he could help with anything else, he humbly declined, not wanting to wrap anyone else up in the Loot House Showdown, where any normal knight would surely die. When Subaru finally meets up with Felt in the slums, he lets her know his phone, or media in this case, is worth at least 20 holy coins, so he's willing to trade, but Felt still requires Rom to approve before going through with the deal. Kinda funny, given Rom is the one who he got that evaluation from in the first place. After hearing this, he grabs Felt's arm and rushes her to the loot house to seal the deal. After their arrival, Ram appraises his phone and what Subaru said turned out to be true. Mistakenly, Subaru accidentally told them Elsa wouldn't go over 20 holy coins in her deal, which Subaru should know at this point unless he was working with her, so Felt became rightfully suspicious. While begging Felt to just do the deal, Emilia knocked on the door and Felt, obviously not realizing it was her, lets her in. Emilia then threatens Felt and demands her to return the stolen insignia, which Felt swiftly accuses Subaru of setting them up. I love this part in particular because it's at this moment everyone realizes nobody knows what the hell Subaru is even doing here. From their perspective, he's not with Emilia as she has no idea who he is, and obviously not Felt and Rom's. Honestly, right now, the most probable scenario would be that Subaru is Elsa's accomplice. Immediately after that, though, Elsa appears from the darkness and tries to slice Emilia up. Luckily, Subaru notices and shouts, "Puck, shield her!" Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this ever gets brought up again. I don't think Emilia ever just asks Subaru like, "Hey, how did you know about Puck?" You would think Emilia would think of him as a stalker or some shit after this, but nothing really comes of it. Hell, Subaru even says the exact time he falls asleep every day as if it's common knowledge, but they've never seen each other in their lives prior to this. Okay, so while editing this video, I realized that it might be common knowledge for the ReZero world inhabitants to just know when spirits generally fall asleep, so this is probably not too weird to them. Anyway, Subaru states, "Do you know how much having your belly cut open hurts? Because I do," continuing to heighten how much of a psychopath he looks like. Turns out this was all a ploy to buy time for Puck though, because Subaru then states, "All done buying time, get her, Puck." Another reminder, this is never brought up again. Anyway, the fight continues, but not in our favor. Rom gets downed and Felt runs to find help, and find help she does. Reinhard enters the loot house and duels it out with Elsa. The battle continues all the way until Reinhardt uses his final blow, which basically explodes the loot house in the process. Elsa escapes and Subaru asks for Emilia's name before passing out. Emilia quickly heals him and Reinhardt asks what his relationship to her is. Obviously this is her first time seeing him too, so she just says she has no idea. He told her the message Subaru told Reinhardt earlier in the alleyway, which was basically, "Don't worry about the insignia problem, I'll fix things." Emilia decides to take Subaru home to the Roswell mansion for questioning, and that concludes the first arc of our story. Next up, Subaru wakes up in Roswell's mansion alone, so he starts wandering the halls. Before long, he realizes the hallway he's in is looping, so he chooses the first door and discovers Beatrice. Betty doesn't miss a beat and delivers a painful blow to Subaru, which simply drained his mana to confirm he wasn't an enemy. He finds out she's not human, but a spirit, and passes out once again. Oh yeah, we also find out Beatrice is the one who healed Subaru, not as we previously assumed was Emilia. All she did was postpone the bleeding. Now this is where Subaru reaches his second checkpoint in the actual show, but here we're skipping 4 deaths this time. Subaru wakes up and is suddenly able to cut vegetables and fruits without hurting himself, along with the ability to read and write simple stuff in Lugniga's language. I'm back here again, Subaru says. Rem and Ram, being quite confused, assume Subaru is still half asleep, as this is definitely his first time in the mansion during this timeline. After some more joking around from the maid sisters, Subaru grabs both of their hands to confirm if it was them who comforted him while he was suffering in his nightmare. After Subaru realizes it was in fact them, he lets out a sigh of relief. These sisters are pretty weirded out though, assuming he's some sort of pervert. Emilia then walks in and Subaru said her appearance cleared any bad thoughts he was having, stating, "You were the wonder drug my heart needed." Emilia didn't really understand that though, because I doubt the ReZero world is medically advanced enough to have anything like a wonder drug. You know how in season 2 Garfield has all those one-liners that make zero sense to us at all? I feel like that's exactly what everyone else feels like talking to Subaru, which I have to believe was Nagatsuki's intention, and I love that. Anyway, Subaru then requests for Roswell to let him work in the mansion, which he kindly accepts, and his job as a butler begins. During his first break, he hangs out with Puck and Emilia. The former lets Subaru know all about how magic works in this world and all the different types. So what does Subaru get? Shadow. Puck teaches him how to use a signature shadow cast called Shamak, a blinding spell. It doesn't go quite well though, since this is literally his first time using magic at all, so the whole courtyard is enveloped in smoke for a few minutes. That evening, we see Ram and Ross discussing Subaru. In terms of abilities, he's completely incompetent, but when it counts, he can be excessively quick-witted. It may be necessary to keep an eye on him for a time, says Rem. Subaru, even later into the night now, asks Beatrice how to counter a shaman's attack out of the blue. Beatrice responds that it's impossible to counter a curse once it's activated and must be detected before it's activated to nullify it. The next day, Subaru wakes up with a disgustingly unnatural burst of energy. He spends the whole morning running around doing the most amount of chores he can while trying to please everyone in the process. In the end though, he pleases nobody. Emilia and Puck obviously take note of Subaru's mental state, commenting on Subaru's insides and outsides being completely different. After knocking over a vase and replacing it, Rem questions his evident knowledge of where the replacements are kept. Subaru eventually capsizes and pukes into the sink. With his physical appearance wearing thin and his mental exhaustion finally reaching its peak, he attempts to continue with his front of a hardworking butler before Emilia asks for him to come to her room. Here, our protagonist receives a lap pillow from Emilia before breaking down for seemingly no reason at all, or at least a reason Emilia isn't privy to, but consoles him nonetheless. Subaru wakes up halfway through the night and then enters through Beatrice's door, crossing as easily as always, and rants to her about what just happened. After some banter between the two, Subaru discovers through her that the curses need physical contact to be placed and that she can detect them. He decides to have every villager touch him to confirm a curse's existence through radio calisthenics. Also, something that always bugged me about this scene is that the villagers don't really have to even touch Subaru. They just have to touch an area around him because most of them just touch his clothes. Unless physical contact means a certain area around you, like an aura of some sort, this doesn't make much sense. Anyway, ignore my little tangent there, back to Beatrice. Beatrice notices his curse and lets him know again that once it's activated, he dies. After hearing this, his expression doesn't really change, which puts Beatrice off a bit, but eventually she agrees to it. Realizing the other villagers could also be cursed, Subaru explains the situation to the maids and Rem comes along. Next, well, back to the village. Here we discover a bunch of kids have gone missing and one of the barrier crystals protecting the village is broken. They rush to the forest to find the children, whom they manage to save. On the way back, Subaru becomes very close to becoming demon dog food and Rem saves him. He still passes out though. The next day, Subaru wakes up next to Puck, who applauds him for his correct judgment of the curse. He then visits all the kids to make sure they're safe, and Betty meets Subaru at the village gate. Again, she's a little put off when Subaru doesn't seem all too worried when she tells him he will die within a day. The conversation continues, which eventually leads to Subaru learning about how to eliminate the curses placed on him in the forest by death of the caster. Upon learning of this earlier, Rem rushed to the forest to save Subaru. Rem overhears this conversation and lets the two know she's going to save her sister, and Subaru joins her. After some mishaps, they fall off a cliff and meet Rem, who's still in her demon form, so she can't really understand them. Rem devises a plan to get her back to normal by smacking her on the head, so they do just that and knock her out and get the hell out of Dodge. She wakes up a few minutes later with her demon form dissipated, as Subaru is carrying her like luggage. Subaru headbutts Rem after she starts blaming herself and gives her an inspirational speech after calling her dumb. He tells them to run while he distracts the boss Ulgarm. Ram grabs Rem and books it, but they don't have time to make it far before Roswell shows up and eliminates all the surrounding Ulgarm, thus saving Subaru from the curse once and for all. Subaru receives a face full of Rem and passes out and wakes up with her holding his hand in the mansion. Upon waking up, he gives Rem yet another speech about how she's her own person and not just her sister's replacement. Subaru is just a speech machine today. Like, what is that? 3 in the last 24 hours? He's gonna give Naruto a run for his money, damn. That night, Subaru does what no anime protagonist has done before and asks Emilia out on a date, which she agrees to for tomorrow. Though tomorrow, it was time for Puck's magic release period, so instead of that date, they had a snow festival, which Subaru hosted. Honestly, this, followed up by a date with his crush the next day, not a bad week. Looks like everything is going perfect for Subaru. Until it wasn't. For now though, yes, the two did indeed have their date. Upon arriving back, Subaru notices an unfamiliar carriage in front of the mansion, so he talks to the butler attending it for a short while, Wilhelm von Astrea. A bit later, during the ride home, Felix, who was accompanying Will, asks him why he indulged Subaru, which he then accurately stated, "Those are the eyes of one who has experienced death several times." A week of peace passes, and it turns out Emilia was enlisting Felix to aid in the healing of Subaru's magic gate, which he severely injured during his fight with the Ulgarm. Emilia, Rem, and Subaru head towards the capital to do just that, as well as for Emilia's participation in the royal selection. During their arrival, they bump into Katomon, then meet Julius. He kisses Emilia's hand, Subaru gets pissed, then notices one of the royal selection candidates, not that he knows this yet, Priscilla, getting mugged, so he goes to save her. Turns out our perpetrators were everyone's favorite thugs, Dumb, Dumber, and Dumbest, so when their advantage disappears when Rom enters the picture, they bolt out of there. Back at Crush's place, Emilia orders Subaru to stay there and not interfere with the royal selection, which he disobeys within minutes of her leaving. He hitches a ride with Priscilla and enters the royal selection hall immediately following Emilia and Roswell. Speaking of them, Emilia looks back to see her trust broken like it meant nothing. Subaru talks to Alan Reinhardt for a bit until all of a sudden Felt bursts in, and it turns out she's the last princess candidate needed for the selection to take place. Felt seems pretty adamant about not wanting to participate when Rom attempts to bust her out and he becomes captured. Then Felt orders them to stand down, with the compromise that she will indeed try to become ruler of Ludnica. Subaru then self-proclaims himself as Emilia's knight and follows it up with insulting and disrespecting the Holy Knights with downright baseless accusations. Because of this, Julius challenges Subaru to an old-fashioned duel and demolishes him, physically and mentally. Emilia runs to the arena and brings Subaru back to Crush's living quarters, where she waits for him to wake up. Upon waking up, the two get into a huge argument, and here goes Subaru yet again far off the rails, for seemingly no reason at all. He has a full-on breakdown and says some disgustingly insulting shit to Emilia. What he thinks is selfless comes off as incredibly selfish and ignorant. The fights end with Emilia cutting ties with him, and she leaves him in the capital. Though he is still scheduled to be healed by Felix, so he stays there. Next, Reinhardt interrupts Subaru's training session to apologize for not stopping his fight with Julius sooner and asks if he'd come with him to see Julius to apologize. Subaru rejects and quickly resumes his training with Will, though it seems the training is more of a distraction and an excuse for Subaru not wanting to seem weak more than anything, as stated by Felix, since there is no notable improvement in Subaru's skills. In the evening, Rem's 180-degree personality change shines through as she comforts him and lets him know she'd stay with him even if she wasn't ordered to. It's now the 4th day in the capital, and Rem and Subaru are out on a shopping trip to resupply on some goods. And finally, we have another checkpoint. Subaru lived a long life since his last death, and I gotta give him credit where it's due, but now we'll be skipping 3 deaths. where he goes from still distraught after his fight with Amelia, but recovering, to being absolutely devastated. Imagine being Rem having a nice conversation with Subaru while you're out buying some apples or whatever, and the second you turn back around, you see this. Before he grabs you and pulls you halfway through the city to some old ruins, after which he begins a super long rant about desiring to run away with you, followed by a self-hate speech involving how much of a piece of shit he is and how everything is hopeless. What do you do in that situation? Well, if you're Rem, you give him the best damn speech he's ever heard and absolutely annihilates any self-hatred and hopelessness residing in his soul. During the next 3 days, a newly invigorated Subaru and Rem gather together allies and information in preparation for the all-important negotiational meeting with Crush. Said meeting's purpose? The creation of an alliance to defeat the White Whale, one of the 3 great demon beasts plaguing the ReZero world once and for all. Of course, we know Subaru only desires the whale's defeat to reach the mansion with many more allies this time, before the witch's cult attacks. Along with granting her the Roswell Domain's mining rights, Subaru also had the exact time and place the demon beast of the mist would next appear, thanks to his phone. Thankfully, Crush could tell Subaru here was telling the truth. This was only thanks to her divine wind reading ability though, so Subaru truly lucked out. But there is just one problem with this. Will Crush even want to help with the subjugation of the whale? Well, that turns out to be another one of Subaru's bets paying off. 3 major things led him to the conclusion that she would help. 1. Through his recent observations of the high traffic passing in and out of Crush's property, which he definitely had many lives to observe. 2. Anastasia letting him know of Crush's large amount of transactions regarding weaponry and armor as of late. And 3. Subaru's overhearing of many conversations with members of Crush's party and allies regarding something big bound to happen soon. Now again, this could very well have been anything, but it was required for Subaru to gamble. He simply doesn't have the time to waste to know for sure. Not only does he have this arsenal of information and bargaining tools, Subaru and Rem also had the foresight to even call upon Russell Fellow and Anastasia Hoshin to join the meeting halfway through. Turns out Anastasia's forces will be assisting in the battle, as the Great Beast has also been in her way for quite some time. Russell, however, is interested in Subaru's proposition to the mining rights. These will allow the Roswell Domain's magic stones to be distributed through the capital through Crush. As the Merchant Guild's representative, he can't just let that go unheard. And with that, we have all of Subaru's cards laid out on the table. With an offer like this, how could she ever turn this down? Of course, Subaru's bet pays off, and she agrees, which concludes our meeting. Even after the negotiations are complete, Crush is met with yet some more surprises, with the fact that Subaru's groundwork went even further. Turns out he agreed to give Russell the media after the whale's defeat, with granting the Hoshin Company an unspecified amount of money if the meeting went well. Which, well, I'd say it went near perfectly. I wanted to make doubly sure I explained all of Subaru's ridiculous prep for this, because it definitely makes him seem a lot more cunning than he actually is, or at least seems to be. I love that. One day, Subaru will be an absolute mess of a human being, as seen at the Royal Selection Hall, with his less than honorable speech in addition to being beaten nearly to death by Julius. Then, less than a week later, he'll appear to be the galaxy brain mastermind behind the unification of several enemy parties. Wilhelm, along with some more veteran swordsmen, thanks Subaru for giving them the opportunity for revenge once and for all. And then, the next day, after some rapid preparation, we are finally off. After a few hours of travel, the convoy finally arrives at Flugel's tree, where they face off against the fabled White Whale. Wilhelm, being the badass master swordsman he is, does about 50% of the work, and after centuries of terror, the demon beast of the mist finally takes its last breath. Post-battle, Subaru and Crush agree to continue being friends, where she discovers the whale's murder was only a secondary objective to Subaru, the main one of course being saving everyone at and around the Roswell mansion from the witch's cult. Said witch's cult have had exactly 0 interactions with Subaru yet, though he knows precisely where they're hiding and informs everyone of their location. Everyone being half of Anastasia's mercenaries, including Julius, and half of Crush's mercenaries, including Felix and Wilhelm. The fact Subaru knows this is obviously suspicious, so Will lets everyone know about the connection between the whale's appearances and the cult activities coinciding with one another. So it's a bit more trustworthy at least, especially coming from the master swordsman himself. Oh yeah, I guess I should mention Rem isn't part of this group. She left with Crush to go to the capital to be healed. Skipping only a single death now, Subaru suddenly asks if a magic exists to possess someone, which Julius replies there is, though only the witch's cults are capable of performing it on other cult members. Subaru then lets them know he is in fact also vulnerable to be possessed. Yep, he just straight up tells everyone he's able to have his body taken over by the witch's cult. How? Are you a member of the witch's cult, Subaru? Care to explain yourself? Nah, they don't do that. But seriously, these guys are believing an awful lot. I guess everything he said so far has been true, so they believe him for the time being and set out. Will drops by the mansion to inform Amelia of the misunderstanding about the blank letter, so Ram did not interrupt the Witch Cult Elimination Force this time. Wow, is that what I really just called them, the Witch Cult Elimination Force? That seems really cheesy, but okay. They gave the fake merchant cultist a schedule which was delayed by 2 hours, so they used that time to evacuate the villagers. The first time Subaru meets Otto officially is right here actually, where he gets wrongfully accused and captured for being a cultist, which Subaru laughs off. Otto still thanks Subaru for saving him, but he's still really confused on why Subaru is acting so buddy-buddy with the guy. I mean, he just met him. Anyway, Subaru and Julius manage to defeat Betelgeuse utilizing their newfound knowledge of his body swap ability. Oh yeah, that's something else I should mention. The last time Julius saw Subaru was in his horrible state at the capital, so now seeing him again in such a rejuvenated form must feel like whiplash. Not able to catch a break though, Felix informs Subaru that Amelia's carriage is rigged with enough magic stones to blow up a small village, so he and Otto rush to her carriage as fast as they can, with Subaru killing Betelgeuse once and for all along the way. When we reach Amelia's carriage, Subaru grabs the bag of magic stones, throws them into the whale's rotting corpse, and the day is saved. Subaru and Amelia make up, and, well, that concludes Season 1. To be completely honest, I was originally actually planning on covering both seasons, but seeing as how this video is already ages long, I'm just gonna cut it here. If the video does well enough, well, then you can expect a part 2 soon, or at least sometime in the future. Thanks for sticking around this long, don't forget to like or dislike depending on how you thought, and have a good day. See ya.